Hello everybody. Today I want to show you how you can use Brokk AI to solve a GitHub real-world issue. Brokk AI is a code assistant we are currently working on, and it's especially useful for large code bases. I picked up this GitHub repository, JBang, to solve one of the bugs here. JBang is a CLI tool which allows you to execute Java files, Java source files on the fly without the need of having to set up a build environment with the linding and compiling and so on. It works out of the box. So let's jump over to the Issues tab here and let's filter the view for bugs. Okay, so here you see the list of bugs, and I was pre-checking it before which bug might it worth to be part of a tutorial. And I think this one here, source type not 100, is something we can cover in a tutorial. So let's jump into that bug. And here you see the description of the bug. So let's open a terminal here to show you the bug itself. I have downloaded JBang and installed it locally on my machine to show you the issue. So if I type JBang here, you see the output of this CLI tool. With JBang, you can directly pipe source code via the pipe to JBang, and then JBang is compiling and executing it. I made a sample here. So for example, if you write an echo of a Java command, like just outputting hello world, and then you can pipe this to the standard input of JBang, and then you need to make a dash at the end. So you are basically saying JBang, okay, I do not provide you a file path. Instead, you can read the content from the standard input. If I click here, it's compiled and executed, and you see the output hello world. We can ignore the warning. It's not important for us. Yeah, but this is how JBang works. Yes, and normally Java is class-based. That means something like this is not valid in Java. So this is a special syntax, which is called JShell, which allows you to use code or write code, which is not part of a method and a static class. And that's the default input for JBang. And the problem now is if you deliver a real Java file, so no JShell code like this here in the sample, so we have a main method here, then you need to change the source type to Java to let JBang know, okay, this is now a Java file and not a JShell file. And this is the bug. This is currently not working, so somehow we could not switch to this type, and we can try to reproduce this. If I go and copy this one to the clipboard, let's jump over to the shell. So I'm under Ubuntu here. If I type in xclip -o, you see it's printing out to the standard output what's inside of the clipper. Okay, and this is the full command. So I'm piping this Java source code to JBang and say, okay, this is now, treat this as a Java file and not as a JShell file, which is the default. You see we got an error here. Now let's switch over to Brokk. I have already cloned the repository, and now I can open this project. You can go via open project, or in my case, I already have opened it. So I go to recent projects and open the project here. And now we see the empty Brokk UI window here, and we are in the repository JBang. And the first thing I would do is to give the AI the text of the issue. So I go back to the browser. I could copy the URL and paste it in. Then it's converted to Markdown. But in this case, we have also some noise because it's a HTML document here. So it's better to copy this manually like this. Control C, switch back, and copy this to the instruction panel. And I also appended this prompt here. See this GitHub issue, create a nice structure out of it so that I can track down the issue. And then I click on Ask. And now the answer streams in, as you see here. Just a disclaimer for future responses, I will skip it out that we not every time have this waiting time. Okay, so now it's finished streaming in the answer. And I can also go here and capture this output with the capture button. And then, as you see, it's moved down to the workspace. So now we have this answer attached twice, because first it's part of the conversation of the chat history. So if I go here and open the chat history, then you see here the current conversation with our question. and with the response coming back from the AI system and the captured panel. In my workflow, I do not like to have too much history here. So in this case, I would go and drop the history so that we only have now this nice description of the issue. So the next thing is to find the relevant files to track down the issue. So I just typed in as an instruction here, track down the issue, and then I simply click on deep scan to go through all the files or through the outlines of the files and let Brokk pick up files are relevant to our instruction. And you see it's coming back with a recommendation which files to include as a summary, which can be useful to answer our question. And summary means it's just including an outline of this file, not the whole implementation, to give the AI a hint about what's inside of these files. And the bottom section we have also tests, and it wants to includes here the test run and the test source Java file to track down the issue. So let's apply this selection. Okay, now you see here we added the files to our current workspace here. So if I click here on the summary above this line, this one, then you see we have only included outlines of these classes. For example, if you see here the class cache, then you only see the outline of these files, including the method signatures, but not the actual implementation. And you also see here the files which are referenced. So you see here 136 files more are included here in the summary. And we have the testrun.java and the testsource.java included here as editable files. And you also see here the lines of code of these workspace fragments. Now I can click on Ask. Brokk came back with a response here to our question. And it's also mentioned here the root problem. The first one is the problem I showed you in the sample. So if the data is coming from the standard input, it's not working. But the issue on GitHub also mentioned a second variant of it. So if you do not use the standard input, instead you specify a file like test.jsh and then switch the source type to Java, it's also not working. So it's the same behavior in that case. If I scroll down here, I see the problem here. It's described here with this 4 points. So basically, it's saying that the type is set by our switch, but it's ignored because the type or the class instance renaming script resource resolver is only added when the original ref has no recognized extension. Okay, so here it's saying that the extension itself is the problem and is leading to the behavior that the switch is not used at all. But we also see here in this response that it's saying it's not shown in, so this class is not completely shown because it's a summary. So what we can do is here, to be sure that this is really the root cause, we can attach more files, not as a summary. We can add it as the full implementation, or we could also use the agentic search to prove that our assumption is correct here. So that's the way I want to do it now. So I capture this response here with the capture button. So it's now moved down to our workspace here. It's here, ask, track down the issue. I can double click to see this. This is the current response. And then I remove all of the other stuff. So what I do is I remove the history, the summary, and also the added files here. So I'm left here with the initial description of the issue and our assumption what the root cause of this is. So now I can go to the instruction panel, and now I verified that the described root problem is really the root cause of the issue. And now I can use the agentic search here to let Brokk use its code intelligent based tools to dig into the source code and to find out whether our assumption is correct. So I click now on search. And now, as you see here, it's digging into the source code. For example, it can look up for symbols, it can asking for giving a class overview, and it can also fetch dedicated method implementations like you see here. After the agentic search is looking into the source code, it came back with this response, and it identified 2 problems in a very detailed way. It contains code snippets, and this is very good for the coder to fix the problem. I do not want to go into details here, but the first problem in a nutshell is simply that the literal script resource resolver ignores the force type. That means the switch we pass to the application, and it acts based on the file extension solely. The second problem, let's scroll down. The second problem is if we pass or provide a file instead reading the Java from the standard input. In this case, another code snippet is activated, and this one is comparing the extension of this file and the force type, and if it's different, it's ignoring it. Okay, so now we have a very good problem description here, and we can capture this file to move it to our workspace. Now you see here for this captured workspace file references, which files the search was looking into to get this result at the end. I can now include all of the related files here with read all files or edit all files. And now the files are added to the workspace. Then I drop the history task here. And now if you look at the workspace, we have the initial description of the issue. We have the assumption, the initial assumption, what was going wrong based on the deep scan. We can also get rid of this. It's not necessary anymore because we have a better explanation of what's going on in our search fragment here. And we have included all of the files necessary to get a good solution. And now we can ask what could be a possible solution. So I ask here, how can I solve this problem? And I click ask. And we see also here we are at the moment at 63K tokens. Brokk came back with the answer here how to solve these problems, and we have here the problem description again. And if I scroll down, I see how to fix the first problem. That means how to respect the force type for the standard input. And we have two possible solutions here: to modify the actual literal script resource resolver to be aware of the force type, or simply to add a second renaming script resource resolver. These are the two possible solutions, and it goes into details at the bottom. The second problem is if we specify the extension, it needs to replace it and not to append it to solve the actual issue. And we have more detailed description here. We have code snippets to guide the coder how to solve that. We can go now into more details if we want, or we can now try to instruct the coder to solve this for us. I would like to do the option 1A, so we can ask or instruct the coder to do so we can write it. So I wrote here implement 1A and 2 like described. We could now get the description what to do from the task history, or we could also capture this and get rid of the task history, drop, and then I simply click on code. The answer was streamed in, and we see it did some file modifications. So it modified the literal script resource resolver. You see it modified around 42 lines here. It modifies the project builder and the renaming script resource resolver. Then it did a verification build. The verification build in this case is Gradle and spotless check. And the verification command is picked up by the build agent initially, and the project is the first time opened. It looks into how to build this project. And you can also check this if you go over File, Settings, and then to Project Build. Let's increase this a little bit more. Then you have here a section what the build and lint command looks like. So it's this Gradle spotless check. There's also a command identified for test all test suites here, unit tests. And we have also a very good summarization of the project, of the environment setup, of the key build commands, and so on. But the verification build is failed. So we see here the bash script. And if I scroll down, then I see the build is failed. And then Brokk immediately tries to fix the errors here. And it's saying, yeah, it needs to modify the markdown source.java because the source.type enum, which is an inner class of source, is not correctly referenced in our file modifications here for the literal script resource resolver. It stopped here because we do not have markdown source Java file in our workspace. In contrast to the agent, which is pulling the data in the workspace by its own, here we are in the driver's seat, so we make sure to have all files we need and to verify that all of the coding stuff is done correctly. So I need now to include this markdown source Java manually, and I want to clean up a little bit the sources here because I think we do not need all of these files here in the context. Now I stripped all files which are not modified, and you can always go back. You do not lose these files. If I go to one step above before in the history, then I see all of the files are here, right? And in our top context, I removed it. You also see it here in the description. I removed these files. If I go to this one, I see now the current top context. And now if we look again at the problem description, and we see we need to include the markdown source Java to get it fixed. So I go here and click on Control E for editing files. I type in ms control space to get an overview over the files which match the search. And I see the first one is the markdown source Java. I can click enter to include this. If I want to include more, I can go to the next line, add other search term, click control space, and add the next one, and so on. But we do not need this here. So I remove this, and then I can go with control enter to move this file to the workspace here. And I can now see I have it here in the workspace. And now our problem description, the failing build is part of the task history. So I let it in the history and just write fix the build error and click on code. It modified the files accordingly, did some verifications, another modification, and at the end it says the build is failing because the calls to literal script resource resolver in run.java have not been updated to include this new force type. So we also need to include the run.java here. So I go ahead and also include the run.java and try to fix the build again. I can also go to the history, fix the build error code. I skipped some steps here because I had a ping pong between Brokk and me, and I opened the task history here to show what happened. At the end, we added the run.java file to the workspace and asked Brokk to fix the problem. And Brokk modified the run.java file here. And after this, it did a verification build here again. And the build was again failing, and it was saying, okay, it also needs the test run.java file in the workspace to do some modifications on that file. So I included also this file and asked again to fix the build error. Then it modified the test run.java files. And now the verification command changed a little bit because we included a test. The build agent decided to execute the test command instead and to execute also the unit test, which is a good thing. And if we scroll down, this verification build was now building and the tests were executed, but 9 out of 150 builds are failed. And then it was looking into the problems, and Brokk was autonomously fixing the problems. So it modified the renaming script resource resolver.java file and runs another verification build. This time we have 4 unit tests failing. And it goes ahead and modified the markdown source.java and re-executed the unit tests. This time we had a little build failure here, so it fixed the build failure and executed the unit tests again. This time only 1 unit test was failing, and at the end it was saying, okay, this is not related to our changes. This unit test is failing because of some environment dependency issue. So it's not related to our changes. So we are basically done and can try whether the fix is working. To get an idea how to build this project and how to execute the JBang executable file or Java file, we can go to the settings and to the build section again here. And if we read through the build instruction here, we find an entry how to create the executable fat jar. And here we have the command. It's Gradle shadow jar, and the output goes to build libs jbang.jar. So we can use this on the console to verify whether our changes are working now. I executed the build command from the instruction panel and clicked on run in shell. And we see here the build is successful and it built the fat jar file, which we can now execute to check whether it's working correctly. And for this, we can use the same pipe from the beginning. We pipe our stuff from the clipboard to the JBang jar file, which we execute here with Java. And then we add the switch minus source type Java. And then we need also the dash at the end. Let's grab again the snippet here, copy with Control C, go back and click on Run in Shell. Okay, and this time we see it's in fact using the Java file and not the JShell extension. We see it here, but we run in another problem. It's saying bad file name, and we can get more insights if we add here the JBang switch minus minus verbose. Click Run in Shell. I captured the execution output here in the workspace context table, and I dropped all of the other files because I think we do not need this to find out what the problem is. And then I ask what happened here. So the answer is the problem is how the temporary output file is created. Because if JBang gets the input from the standard input, it's creating a temporary file. Previously, it was always a JShell file. Thankfully, our code now produces a Java file. This is correct. But the problem is the file begins, in this case, with a number. And the snippet in the clipboard we use is using a preview feature. So if we go back to the issue, then we see here we are using a preview feature in JBang. You can recognize this. It's using the term preview here. And this feature means that you can use a top-level main function for the entry point, because normally you need to wrap this in a static class, and the start function here also needs to be static. And this is a preview feature. And here it says, since your compilation unit contains no explicit top-level type, the compiler treats it as an implicit or unnamed class. Here's the specification for this. And it says that name must be a legal Java identifier. That means it needs to start with an underscore or a dollar, followed by letters, digits, and so on. The problem is that the hash we are generating, this GUID, is starting with a number which is not valid, not a valid class name. So we need also to tweak the code which is creating this name for this temporary file. That's the next thing we do, but we can commit our code here. I can highlight all of the files we changed, and I can also go through the changes in detail if I want. I can do this also inline here with the embedded diff tool, and I can go to the next change and look through the changes here. I can also do this with an external tool, and if I'm satisfied with that, I can suggest a commit message here. For example here, allow forcing script type for standard in and markdown sources, and can commit this to have this in BCS.